Hey everyone! In this video I'm going to show you how to calculate overtime pay. So the big idea for overtime is that for most jobs that pay wages, workers can earn extra money called overtime for working extra long shifts, many hours in 1 week, working on a holiday, working a night shift or on a weekend, working in undesirable times. The idea behind this is that employers often need employees to work more than they usually do. And employees often don't want to work more than they usually do. They want to clock out at the usual time, go home to their families, and do whatever it is they want to do when they're not working. So a lot of employers will give extra money for working these hours beyond the usual, or hours when they wouldn't want to, like Christmas Day, for instance. And this is usually calculated as a multiple of regular hourly pay. So time is your base hourly pay. It's whatever you're paid per hour. And time and a half then means 1.5 times, literally time and a half, of your pay. Double time is 2 times your regular pay. 2.5 times would be double time and a half. So on for triple time would be 3 times your pay. Triple and a half would be 3.5 times. Quadruple, quintuple, and so on. Although realistically, I've never heard of anyone earning more than triple time. So let's see how this works with an example. Marcel works for a makeup company and earns $15.82 an hour for a 37.5-hour work week. So that's a typical, 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. 37.5 hours ends up being your weekly number of hours. So he's paid time and a half for any time he works in excess of those 37.5 hours. If he works for 42.25 hours 1 week, how much will he earn? To solve this, our first step is going to be to turn that 37.5 hours into a decimal number we can actually work with. So that half, if you don't know, a half 1/2 literally means 1 divided by 2, which you can plug into your calculator to get 0.5 if you don't have that memorized. Similarly, later in the question, that quarter hour, you can plug 1 divided by 4 into your calculator. If you don't have it memorized, that it's 0.25. Although that's literally like a quarter, right? 25 cents. Anyway, so his regular hours then is going to be 37.5. So we're going to calculate his regular pay the usual way with a unit rate. So $15.82 per 1 hour is his hourly rate, and he gets paid that for 37.5 hours. And then his regular pay, I guess I'll do R for regular. His regular pay, then you cross multiply and divide. So multiply those two. Divide by 1 doesn't matter. But once you cross multiply and divide, you get his regular pay is $593.25. So that's what he earns in a regular week. Now, why might he want to stay extra? It's because his employer is going to offer time and a half. So let's figure out his overtime rate. Now remember, time and a half literally means 1.5 times his hourly pay. So we're going to take his hourly pay of $15.82 per hour, and we are going to literally multiply that by 1.5. And so his overtime rate, once you plug it into a calculator, is $23.73, but that's still a rate, so it's still dollars per hour. Now our next step, we need to figure out how many hours he works in overtime. He doesn't get the overtime pay for the full 42.25 hours because he's already been paid for the first 37.5 hours. So his overtime hours is going to be the difference between the two. And a difference literally means subtraction. That's the math word for subtraction is difference in a word problem, or if you're talking about what you're going to do. So this 42.25, the quarter we said is 0.25. So this is 42.25 hours minus the 37.5 hours that he's already been paid for. And so his overtime hours are 4.75 overtime hours. Last step, let's figure out, second last step actually. We're going to figure out his overtime pay. His overtime pay is going to be his overtime rate, which we calculated at 23.73 per 1 hour. And he earns that for all 4.75 hours he works overtime. So his overtime pay, let's make that P, I guess. I really don't like O as a variable because it looks like a 0. So let's do P for its overtime pay. And we are going to cross multiply and divide, just like that. And we figure out that it is 112.7175. Now this is money, of course. Since it's money, we want to keep 2 decimal places. And since this here is a 7, we actually need to round that up to 72 cents. So his total pay is his regular pay. His regular pay that he gets every week, the thing we calculated first, was $593.25. Then we are going to add to that his overtime pay of $112, and don't forget to round correctly, 72 cents. And when we add that up, let's see, we get 7, 9, so 97 cents, 5, and that is going to be 0, $705.97 is his total pay. That's a lot of work for one question. The reason is that in a lot of these overtime questions, you need to calculate the regular pay the regular way, but then you also need to calculate your overtime rate. You then need to calculate your overtime hours. Then you need to use both of these things combined to give you your overtime pay, which you then need to combine into a total. So that simple overtime question is unfortunately 5 steps. Let's try another example. Natalie works as a playground supervisor for 8 weeks during the summer at a rate of $15.25 an hour for a 40-hour week. If she averages 3.5 hours of overtime each week and is paid at double time for her overtime, how much will she earn during the summer? So there's a few ways you could approach this. This sort of 8-week thing is going to throw in sort of a little complication. The way I'm going to approach that 8 weeks is I'm going to just deal with that 8 weeks right at the very end. So my last step is going to be to take whatever I got in my first steps and multiply by 8. And I think that's the simplest way to do that. There are other ways, but let's do that way. So let's figure out her regular pay. So her regular pay, we're going to do the usual way. So it's $15.25 per 1 hour for 40 hours. Her pay goes up top. We cross multiply and divide, and every single week her regular weekly wage is an even $610. Beautiful. Good job, Natalie. Okay, now we're going to figure out her overtime wage. And I called it a rate here. I'm calling it a wage down here, whatever you want to call it. How much is she paid per hour for overtime? So we are going to take her $15.25 per hour, and we are going to multiply that by double time. Double time means multiply by 2. And so her overtime wage is literally double that, so it's going to be $30, and then double 25 cents is 50 cents. So $30.50 per hour. That is a really nice overtime wage. She's lucky to get that much. So now for overtime hours, in this question, thankfully, it was given to us, so we don't need to do this like subtraction step we did above here. We can just skip that. So we just need to set up her overtime rate with her 3.5 hours. Now again, 3.5 is going to be 3.5. You can do that by 1 divided by 2 in a calculator if you need to. So we'll set up her rate. Her overtime pay is $30.50 per 1 hour, and she gets paid that for 3.5 hours. And so her overtime, let's say X, I guess. Doesn't matter what letter you choose, but it matters that you cross multiply and divide the right way. And we get her overtime pay is $106.75. $106.75. So let's figure out her regular weekly wage. So weekly, she earns her regular pay of $610 plus her overtime of $106.75. Add that up, we're going to get 75 cents. 6, 1, and 7. So $716.75 per week. So for 8 weeks, you can solve this in 2 ways. You can think of this rate that we just found as a unit rate. And when you've got a unit rate, you can just multiply by your number of units to figure out your pay. So if you understand that, you can just multiply by 8 and get your answer. If you aren't as confident with that, that's okay. Set this up as a proportion. So we've got $716.75 for 1 week, and we want to know her pay for 8 weeks. So we cross multiply and divide. Or if you noticed, you could have just multiplied by 8. Regardless, you get your final answer of... where did I do it? There it is. $5,734. And there is your final answer. Fabulous. Okay, let's try the one example to rule them all. Yeah, this one's a tough one. I'm looking forward to it. I think this is a fun question. I actually know someone named Doug who's a camera operator, and his contract actually does work like this. So these numbers are going to seem ridiculous, but some people actually literally earn this, and it's kind of crazy. So let's go through and figure this out. So Doug works as a camera operator and earns $50 an hour as his usual wage. Caveat, the actual Doug I know, I have no idea what he earns. I made up $50 an hour to make the numbers a bit easy. But anyway, let's keep going. $50 an hour sounds really nice, doesn't it? So anyway, in his contract, he states that he earns time and a half for any hours he works over 10 in one shift. So his first 10 hours, he earns $50 an hour. Over that 10 hours, he gets time and a half. But he gets double time and a half for any hours past 12 hours. So on one project, he worked an 11-hour day. And then the next day, he worked 16 hours. Now, I don't know about you. I really, really do not ever want to work a 16-hour day. That sounds really awful. But actually, I say that. But if I'm getting double time and a half for those hours after 12, I'll actually be pretty happy working those extra hours. Anyway, so let's figure out what's his total pay for the 2-day job. Now, the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to figure out his regular hours across both days, his overtime hours across both days, and then his double time and a half hours for the one day that he gets them. I think that's the easier way to do that. So his regular pay, he's got 10 hours each day, and he gets his full 10 hours on both days. So 10 times 2, of course, is 20 hours. So his regular pay is going to be his $50 for 1 hour for the 20 hours he worked regular across both days. And 50 times 20, when you cross multiply and divide, gives you a regular pay of $1,000. Okay, so for the 2 days, he earns $1,000 for working his 10-hour shifts. Now, how many overtime hours does he get? Overtime hours. So day 1, he worked 11 hours, but he already got paid for the first 10 hours, right? The first 10 hours are over here. So he only worked 1 hour overtime the first day. And then day 2, he worked a total of 16 hours. But remember, he gets double time and a half for the hours past 12. So the overtime hours is only the hours up to this 12 hours. After the 12 hours, we're into this double time and a half, that juicy, juicy, tons of money category. So he only gets 2 hours on the second day at his regular overtime, and that combines to 3 hours for his time and a half. So let's figure out his regular overtime, his time and a half pay. So his 1.5 time pay, we need to figure out, first of all, how much his 1.5 times rate is. And actually, while we're here, let's figure out his double time and a half rate as well. Let's do both of these at once just to save a little bit of space. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take his regular $50 an hour, and I'm going to multiply that by 1.5, or I'm going to multiply that by 2.5. So that works out to $75 an hour as his time and a half, or $125 per hour. I'm pausing for dramatic effect. I would love to work for $125 an hour. Sign me up. Anyway, let's keep going. So his 1.5 times pay is going to be the $75 per hour that he's earning for his overtime. And the 3 hours that he's working at his time and a half goes down here, and his 1.5 times pay, I'm going to be boring and call that X, I guess. So X is 3 times that, which is $225. Pretty solid. Okay, now let's get to the juicy part. I'm excited about this. I don't know if you are. 2.5 times pay. Okay, I just want to pause right here. $125 per 1 hour is our rate. That's like lawyer pay. That's like lots of money. That's crazy. And he's working that for, how many hours? Uh-oh, I forgot to figure that out. Okay, let's figure that out right now. So he has 16 hours minus the 12 hours that he's already been paid for, right? So he got paid for 2 of the hours here, and he got, here, I'll do a different color so you can see. So he got paid for 2 of the hours here, he got paid for 10 of the hours here. So that gives us our 12 hours. So when you subtract, that leaves 4 hours at this crazy rate. I know it's only 4 hours, but still. 4 hours at $125 an hour, I would take any day. Okay, so 4 times 125, we're going to cross multiply that, and you get $500 for 4 hours work. Oh, I love it. I wish I could earn that. I bet you do too. Okay, so that brings us to our total pay. Now in this case, we've got 3 things to add up. We've got our regular pay, we've got our 1.5 times pay, and we've got our 2.5 times pay. So regular pay was an even 1,000. His 1.5 times pay, there it is 225. And his 2.5 times pay is 500. So what a beautiful contract. He earned $725, sorry, that should be a 7, not a 2, $725 extra beyond his original 1,000. That's awesome. That's $1,725 for his crazy overtime. Now, if you go to the practice on the next page, you can go right into the overtime questions. Those first 3 questions are just like this. And Alex, by the way, Alex is Doug's son, who's also a camera operator. So it's a similar question to the one we just did. Hope you enjoyed as much as I did.